Joining us now to talk about a lot of topics, we're going to start with the horrific anti-Semitic hate crime at the synagogue in Pittsburgh. Just one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen. I don't know what this country is coming to, but these crazy people just go into it. People are praying and they just get massacred on a Saturday morning. Unbelievable. Joining us now for that and many other things, Liz Peek from New York. You can follow Liz at Liz Peek. She's also a contributor to The Hill. Liz, great to have you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Liz, 8 days to the midterms, a lot at stake here. All of us were just shocked and dismayed and saddened and sickened by another massacre in another place of worship. Liz, what is going on in the United States?
I don't know. I think that there really has been a hardening of attitudes. I think there's anger everywhere. And I think, look, I don't think it's new with Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump was elected in part because of the anger that has boiled up against what people refer to as the ruling elites, or however you want to describe it. And I do think that's true to some degree. I think that there's a real feeling amongst a lot of people in this country that they have been ignored, brushed aside, as people who running big businesses and big institutions have benefited from globalization and really not stopped to think about what that meant for some other people in the country. But, it is alarming because we are about, as you point out, to have another election, and I'm afraid that, there's a good chance that the Democrats are going to retake the House of Representatives, and the progress that has been made under President Trump in righting some of the wrongs that have prevailed, it's going to be rolled back. I mean, I really think this is an incredibly dangerous situation. And by the way, for anyone who thinks that the Democrats might be mollified by taking back the House, that the firestorm of political activism and hate speech and everything might calm down, forget it, because we're going to have Nancy Pelosi as Speaker, one of the most dishonest politicians out there and one of the most ruthless competitors. We have people like Maxine Waters going to be taking over the House Financial Services Committee and Adam Schiff taking over the Intelligence Committee. I'm not making these things up. Those are the ranking members. And from all appearances, those are the people who are going to be running these committees. And what we're in for, John, is 2 years at least of endless investigations, subpoenas into every aspect of Donald Trump's life and finances and business organization. It's going to be an incredible mess. And I think, honestly, people are just going to get angrier and angrier as this goes on.
It's a sad situation.
It is.
Liz, what did you think of Adam Schiff and the Democrats on the heels of this horrific hate crime? I mean, I am beside myself with what happened in Pittsburgh. I just can't believe we're still having this. But then they get out the next day and they go on TV and they blame the president for this. I mean, what is the matter with these people?
Well, I saw more blame throwing after all the bombs that were sent to Democrat favorites, like Maxine Waters. I thought after this particular event there was less of that, really, because this guy hated Trump as much as he hated Jews, apparently. You and I have talked about this before. I think after the Parkland school shooting, we both agreed that having people like this fellow who's ranting and raving on social media have access to an AK-47 it's really unconscionable. And I don't know how to change that, but it does seem to me that it should be changed, because without that kind of weaponry, he could not inflict the damage that he did. But I do think this country has been trending more violent for 20 years. I think it starts in the entertainment industry, which has taken no responsibility whatsoever for the fact that they're constantly spinning out ever more hate-filled and violent movies. The video games, John, there's just too much money on the table, because you can produce a new popular video game that is horrifying in detailed murder, rape, all kinds of scenes that really are not healthy, and they make $1 billion within a day. Literally, that's possible in some of these games that are coming out. There's no will to roll that back. And I do think, studies have shown that kids, particularly young men, are desensitized by all this material that they're exposed to and that they engage in. They sit behind a little computer and spend their days mowing down women, babies. I don't know if you've ever looked at any of this stuff. It is horrifying in terms of its graphic detail and the violence that it encourages. So I don't think it's all about Donald Trump. I do think the country needs to take stock. I actually would like to see the president and the leaders of both parties kind of come together and say, okay, we get it. This is not helping the country, all this blame game stuff and hurling epithets and insults at each other. Let us try to elevate our discourse. I don't know if it's possible because you have people like Michael Avenatti who has decided that his greatest shot at fame is being just as vulgar and aggressive and hate-filled as he can be. That's his mantra, and it's working. He went from being an absolute non-entity a year and a half ago to now having millions of followers in social media. That's really despicable, and he is despicable, but unfortunately it works for him.
Well, it works for him in the short term, I guess. But even the short term, the guy is a completely loathsome character. Yeah. But you got to blame CNN for giving this guy hours and hours and hours of primetime media coverage talking about the president's private parts, and whatever it is that they talk about on CNN is so ridiculous. They've given him hours and hours of coverage as if he's legit. He's not. And if you study the guy, he's bankrupted every business he's ever had. He's got every partner he's ever had is suing him. The guy's an absolute ambulance chaser creep. And CNN put this guy on the national stage. It's unbelievable what is going on. But I agree with you with these video games. We try to monitor. I've got one child left at home, a 14-year-old. The others are gone. We try to monitor that. And we're very fortunate, Liz, in this day and time because our youngest son's an athlete. And so, the overwhelming majority of his time is spent working out, baseball, basketball. And, it's every single week. It's like this weekend we were in Washington, and next weekend he's in Richmond. It goes on every single weekend. Thank goodness for that. But I just want to start with what you said, and then I'm going to get to a break in politics. Why this guy has access to an AK-47 is beyond me. And I know I'm going to get all my Second Amendment gun listeners all upset, and I'm going to get 15 texts. I don't care. Do you really think this guy should have had access to an automatic weapon? The guy was a kook on social media. I get the whole gun thing. I get we have to have automatic weapons if the government, tries to put us in internment camps or whatever. All right, I get it, okay? I'm all there. But, take a breath, right? Does a guy like this...
Again, after Parkland, you and I talked about this, and we agreed that there had to be some reshaping of the dialogue on this because everyone has taken a very hard position. People, I agree, an awful lot of people who I join as conservatives in almost every realm are hard and fast on the idea that there should be no limits on gun ownership. And I think some of the things that have been put forward in terms of if you have, if you're mentally ill or, if you have some history of violence, if things like if you have a constraining degree or whatever it's called, a restraining agreement against you because you've been violent towards a woman, things like that, you should not be able to have certainly a high-caliber gun. I don't know what's the right way to approach it, but it does seem to me we have too many of these incidents, and almost always they take on much more gravity, and they're much more worse than they would be because people have, guns they can. Think about what happened in Las Vegas when the guy shot whatever it was, 50 people or whatever. Honestly, we should not. This is unconscionable. We cannot let this continue. And again, I'm not smart enough to figure out what kind of constraints should be mandatory, but I just can't imagine that the country wouldn't welcome some reprieve from these mass shootings.
Why not ban them for 72 months and see if there's
and see
a
what
change?
happens.
I mean, but
now,
it's not...
I do agree with those who say, okay, what happens when you outlaw guns is that only outlaws will have guns. I do think there's some truth in that. But at least we could start. We could start trying to limit their availability in ways that we haven't yet. It's a possible approach.
I mean, I think you could give it a shot or make the screening such that, your social media is scanned. I mean, if anybody saw this guy's social media post, he should not have been able to buy an automatic weapon. The guy was
Absolutely.
Crazy. And
I don't know if he bought it legally.
I don't know either, and maybe he didn't. But, I mean, there needs to be a dialogue, but we're not going to have it. We're certainly not going to have it.
Not.
8 days before the midterms. John Fredericks Radio Network. So bottom line the Democrats need 23 seats. So I just had Scott Rasmussen on. He told me 12 of those, mail them in. That means they need to pick up 11 seats and 30 are toss-ups. So they need 11 out of 30. If you're doing the math here, the Democrats now overwhelmingly, it's theirs to lose. Can the Republicans hang on?
I don't know. 538 has Democrats winning the House, 6 out of 7. That is 85% odds. And they look at this stuff closer than I do, certainly. It does seem to me that I think the Democrats will take the House. I don't think they're going to take it by a huge majority, but it doesn't really matter. As I point out, I think it's going to lead to just an unbelievably rancorous 2 years, more partisan bickering, more investigations into the president, less ability to get things done. Now, there are voters out there who are saying, hey, Republicans have had the House forever. What's it done for us? They've had the Senate. But the answer is the House has actually passed a lot of bills that are incredibly important, and the Senate has simply sat on them because Democrats have insisted in the Senate on maximum floor debate time on every single nominee from this government. Someday, I'm going to write about what's gone on in the way of putting people in place in this administration. Democrats have been very effective and absolutely unpatriotic, in my view, in stalling and standing in the way of putting people in charge of organizations, for example, like Social Security, which is about a third of our federal budget. There's no one running. There's no appointed person running that organization because the guy has been left hanging in the wind, even though he's someone who's already been confirmed by the Senate on 2 former occasions. It is appalling, John. It is so bad faith that the Democrats have operated in. People can be mad about President Trump for one thing or another, but really they need to look at the absolutely, as I say, sort of bordering on unpatriotic behavior of Democrats running congressional organizations because they have really blocked progress for this country. Obviously, there are issues like immigration where this administration had a proposal on the table, which, by the way, almost every part of was wildly popular with the American people. Democrats don't want immigration reform because that gets rid of a wedge issue for them. I wish Latino voters would wake up and realize that Democrats have done nothing for them. They're not going to do anything for them. And, why vote for them? I mean, it's time for people to assess what have you done for me lately.
Well, you look at the numbers right now, and especially the Republicans were getting some momentum. The violence has really stalled that. I mean, that's just reality. People look at this and they're like, well, let's just put somebody else in charge, get a little balance. That's what's going on now. I've only got 20 seconds, Liz, but I have to read this text I got from Eric, who's a Second Amendment gun owner from Richmond. He says, there are already countless numbers of firearms out there. I own an AR, but I kind of like the idea of a temporary moratorium on the sale of some weapons and see what happens. Certainly couldn't hurt. You turned one person. John Frederick's Radio Network.